If you really feeling this, gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is 11/12, 2022. Um, I thank you so much for all the support and also everyone that has given great feedback. Um, this is the VOC podcast. I am Jabari. And if you like what you're hearing today, like, share, support. The link will be below. Monthly subscriber, whatever you feel that is best that you can give towards keeping this podcast going. But thank you all so much that has been supportive, and we're going to get right back into it with music, culture, and politics. And in this part of the half is mostly politics and culture, and it is we're on the cusp of Trans Remembrance Day that is always celebrated on November 20th. And it has always been annually put together effectively, and so much great turnouts have come here in New Haven. And one of the organizers, who is actually like one of the original who have organized Trans Remembrance Day, I have him on the podcast today. And again, like for so long, we have to just keep having these conversations and centering trans people's voices instead of what I see other podcasters doing, the cis podcasters, my fellow cis guys that are always on there giving their opinions and not actually adding or inviting anyone to platforms to have a discussion. So I'm not for that. I think you should talk to everyone instead of just ignoring voices. And we're going to continue to talk about this. So I have Kirill on, who is a very great friend of mine as well too. And we're going to talk about PeerPride, and we're going to talk about the PeerPride, which is his nonprofit, and we're going to talk about Trans Remembrance Day. Hello.
Hey Jamar, what's up? Yeah, it's going. Good to be on again.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out to be able to come on. I have right here, for people that are in Connecticut, I have actually a flyer that I will show here visually on where you can participate at to be a part of TDOR in Connecticut. We're going to look at that real quick. Oh, I got to remove everybody's faces.
Real map? Like, no, it's not. It's not a map. I'm about to be like,
I can't even,
New Haven's in the quiet corner now.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Were you going to say? I'm sorry. No, I heard you. I heard you, but when I took your face off the screen,
gotcha.
It didn't overlap, which is sad. It does that sometimes, but it didn't do it that time.
No, it's all
but
good.
Those are the dates. What were you trying to say though? So
I was just making a joke. I was saying, because I was on the radio yesterday, and they were like, "This is a map." I'm like, "This is not a map. That's not where New Haven is. It's just artistic license."
No, it's not a map. Like, if anyone looked at that,
people are like, "Oh, it's a map." It's not a map.
New Haven is not all the way up there near fucking Massachusetts, dude.
No, we got to move it around to make it fit. It was like a whole thing. We might have to move it around now because so many people think it's a map. It's not a map. Find your city and then Google map it.
That is absolutely dope.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are you having estimate to be a part of all this?
Oh, it is so hard to guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because right in New Haven, we tend to have a really big turnout, compared to a lot of places. Obviously, Hartford. Shout out to Reverend Pastor Aaron Miller, who's been doing this for so many years now. Hartford's always had their annual T-Door. New Haven's had our annual T-Door every year. But what's really cool and what makes this unpredictable is actually a lot of these locations are places where there hasn't been a T-Door historically.
Mm-hmm.
Like Waterbury, if there has been one, the trans people that are organizing it are not aware of there having been one.
Mm-hmm.
Avon, Torrington, Danbury, Bethel, some of those locations, if there have been vigils, it's been fairly small, that or it hasn't happened. And so a lot of the people that are actually involved in organizing this are trans youth, they're trans people who just happen to live in a certain area. They're not, professional or like long-term organizers. They're just folks who want to bring trans people together in a space that's by and for trans people. And I think that's what's really cool about this initiative. So to your question, I don't know how many people to expect. It could be very small, it could be very large.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it depends on the city. What we've been talking about as a team is that it doesn't matter if it's big or small. What matters is that people have a space to go. And even if one trans person has a space to go on a day that is complicated for us, it's a day of remembrance for us, it's a day of a lot of care and a lot of very raw emotion for our community. That's a win in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something I definitely talked about with Norman from Q Plus when I had him on last week about
Mhm.
the importance of just taking up space and having space, um, especially with kids. Um, Especially right now, like maybe I'm too young to understand, but like I'm seeing like the need so much more right now with all the attacks all around the United
Oh yeah.
States with legislation and everything. Um, and I'm just shocked that this is not a national holiday. But would trans people want this to be acknowledged as a national holiday? Because I think it would probably be like you know taken away corporately, like everything else.
A good question. I mean, I can't speak for all trans people.
Hmm.
Do trans people want something? I don't know. I don't know what trans people want. But I guess my first impulse with Trans Day of Remembrance is one of the things that's kind of complicated about it is when people think of a day for trans people, a lot of the time the first place where people's heads go is to Trans Day of Remembrance.
Hmm.
And that's kind of, like you'll see a lot of like organizations doing like trans stuff around Trans Day of Remembrance, like general trans stuff. Like you'll see a lot of companies and agencies and stuff like having trans specific messaging in November, trans specific messaging around Trans Day of Remembrance. And you're right, that's good that people notice us and
Hmm.
are doing something. But I do think that it's telling, and it's a little sad for a lot of us that the day that we're recognized, that is recognized as our day, is the day of our funerals in our community, right? Um,
Hmm.
it's the day when we remember all the lives lost to transphobic violence around the world.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a complicated thing because of course, it does acknowledge the need for immediate action. It acknowledges the need to respond to the epidemic of transphobic violence around the world and inside the United States. But there's more to us than just the fact that we get killed. And I think like focusing in on TDOR as the trans day
Mm.
says that like the way that we want to acknowledge trans people is when they're dead.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's definitely something that is a huge conversation to have because it's just like the trend of how activism is, in my opinion, of just how what's the best way that we can make an impact. And so it's like
Mhm.
ever growing in this idea of how we can bring more to light on all these issues, and also bring more to light on the badass activists and fighters that were there before us,
Mhm.
the Stonewall
Yeah.
that actually gave us the freedoms that we have and everything. um
Mhm.
and I see that between, like, with me being a part of, as a pansexual, I do see the disconnect between sexuality and actual identity, and then how it's important to be aware of that. And a lot of liberal news will bring on somebody that's just gay to talk about trans issues, when that's just, it's not effective.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I'm still here. I have a
Oh no,
cat
you're fine.
situation. I have like a dog on one side. I'm like sandwiched between like bitey faces. Anyway, go get in the window. You want to get in the window, go. Um, oh my god. Anyway, so you were saying, yeah, I think it's very important to have trans people speak on trans stuff by and for trans people, right? Um, a lot of the time, people will be like, "Oh, we have a trans person, we have like a token trans person to talk about things," and that's very different than having spaces that are like broader by and for trans people. And I think that's the objective here, is to um, bring back, um, a kind of a sense of community to Trans Day Remembrance,
Hmm.
and a
Hmm.
sense of community care, and an opportunity for people to grieve together, an opportunity for people to connect with each other, to build community, um, and to have that be safe by being, by and for trans folks.
Yeah. All organized, all led by trans folks is what needs to always be a thing.
Hmm.
And people that sign on should be on being supportive instead of trying to, take over. But one thing I love about your like, I looked into the aspects of your nonprofit, and I love I have four things that were on your website that I definitely wanted to delve into, because I feel like it gives a very good community base of what is materialist, not full on material need, but a basis of how to give community, and give and help out with need, for trans people. For instance, the curriculum development. Um, are you are you in schools with this curriculum development? Is it sort of similar to Q Plus's approach, or is it a different idea?
So we do a lot of different things, and different members of the PeerPride team do like have different specializations.
Hmm.
For me personally, I work within my professional field typically with curriculum development. So I'll develop trainings and guidelines and best practices specifically for peer support and crisis support and suicidology
Hmm.
work. So that's the field that I work in. But we also have team members that do, work with schools and universities that, we've been asked, for example, to revise curriculum for, um, some healthcare associations,
Hmm.
specifically like a nursing association, hired us to revise their curriculum to make it trans competent. So there's a number of different things that people plug into. We have one team member who specializes in sports, specifically into personal training and fitness and stuff like that. So that's the field that he works in. Um,
Hmm.
so it's kind of a grab bag of different people with different specializations. But the
Hmm.
type of things that we tend to get asked about a lot is trans competency, general LGBTQ competency, racial competency, and accessibility. So those tend to be the main topics.
Mm. Okay, so basically, is this like a consultant type of like a consultant similarity, like you get hired on,
Mhm.
um and you have done a lot of programs that are reflect in New Haven as well.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah. So
that's
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
do. We do. No, you're good. We do both things, right? So we have the consulting kind of prong of the fork where we offer people support around like developing whatever services they need assistance with that are within our our scope of competencies. We also are working on ethical and private and free open source hotline and warm line software. So that's another thing that we're doing that's going to be available. Like the code will be available for free once it launched.
Mhm,
And then in Connecticut specifically, we have our Trans Haven programs, which are by and
mhm,
for trans people, direct service work. We offer social spaces, support groups, trans peer support training. We have a free binder program. We work together with an organization in Bolivia as well, where we supply binders there, and we also help with peer support
wow.
organizing down there. So that started earlier this year, and we're really excited about that.
How is that
And we,
going?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's good. So we have one of our lead team members is from Bolivia, and he does a lot of organizing work down there. Unfortunately, I wish he could
Mhm,
be here today with us to talk
mhm,
about it. But it started as a kind of an accident where he reached out to me and he was like, "Yo, like, do you know where we can get some extra binders?" Because I'm going back home to Bolivia and I'm going to be working with some you know some organizations down there, and they have a problem where their mail system is effectively shut down in the country. So the only way to get anything shipped there is through private like shipping services, which is insanely expensive. So
mm.
he was going down there and he wanted to bring a big suitcase of chest binders. So PeerPride Transhaven got together and we were like, hey, if you have an extra binder, we're sending a suitcase of binders to Bolivia. Can you please donate? And all these trans people from like all around, not just Connecticut, but like the tri-state area, people are like mailing in binders. There's like binders flying in from
Wow,
everywhere. We ended up
that's awesome.
getting, we ended up getting a big donation just from one person. So we ended up sending a huge suitcase of binders, and it became a thing. Now we have a partnership with the binder company GC2B, who supplies us with free binders for Connecticut and Bolivia every month. And the plan is to have the Bolivia shipment go out annually.
Mm,
So we're going to be supplying binders there, but also Kay Vargas, who is our team member, goes down there and helps with organizing like safe spaces for trans people, doing advocacy work, especially for young trans men who are in prison. That was a
mhm.
big portion of the people who received our binder shipment, who received a lot of his support.
Wow. And so Bolivia definitely has what is the atmosphere, if you know of, just to talk about Bolivia for a second, with being trans? Is it aggressive, or is there any signs of trying to be more progressive in comparison to the United States, or is it still like a uh, not as important to the government as of right now, but because of everything that's going on there, let's just be honest, like it's not like here in the United States where we can actually like focus on certain things, but they went through a fucking coup and all this shit. Like they got
Mhm.
their own issues, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of issues. For me personally, as somebody who's living in the U.S., I think it's important to focus on the U.S.
Hmm.
But there's definitely a lot of unique issues that have to do a lot of the time with U.S. meddling in
Hmm.
in South America and Latin America, um, and I think a lot of the organizing that happens on the ground there. Is very grassroots. It's very, very trans led. It's very similar to, um, from what, like, honestly, from what I've observed and from what I've heard from people, like, it's similar to trans organizing in the US South.
Hmm.
There's a lot of very grassroots work. For example, one of the people that we collaborate with there is a doctor who is trans, who is just working to help fundraise for people to be able to get their like blood lab tests done because it's
Yeah.
so expensive. Um, and it's, there's no financial assistance around that. Similarly, right, there's issues with accessing like gender affirming medication like hormones. There have like a lot of time people have to be creative with how to get them into the country and how to like get shipments because it's so expensive to ship anything.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of barriers around that, and you'll see things like supportive healthcare providers who are trying to organize on a grassroots level alongside other trans people.
Mm.
So that's the dynamic. I mean, you'd want to have Kay on to talk about the dynamic in Bolivia more, since he's there a lot.
Yeah, I
But
would love to
yeah,
have him on. Yeah,
yeah,
and just looking at how the U.S. is, when if someone that was blind, one thing that I have had discussions with, and I'm not saying blind like physically blind. I'm talking about just blind to just what's happening. Um, One thing I had discussions with some of my fellow African American peers is there's a myth that apparently um, trans and gay people have more rights in the United States than Black people do. Um, and it's definitely a subject that I have seen reoccur. And I don't even know where this myth has started, because Obama was definitely throwing trans people into solitary confinement. He was not really a good president. I don't think any president, honestly, was a good president towards trans people in the United States. And you see the attack now, and I think we should address that, because I think this is a myth that cis straight people um, just created out of nowhere to try to like keep a division when it really should not be a divisive a stance like this. And when you
yeah,
see, like, look what happened in Florida. They just took healthcare away from trans kids in Florida,
yeah, yeah,
and it's it's a lot of attacks, and it's all in different ways. It's the divide and conquer capitalist idea that has been so effective to keep people away from organizing.
yeah. No, it is. It is very effective. There's a big part of um, what works with this division is the idea that there's no overlap between experiences, right? So a lot of the time, you'll hear like you'll hear a lot of like Black trans organizers say, you know, being Black and trans is not mutually exclusive, right? Or like being Black
Hmm.
and queer is not mutually exclusive, and you hear a lot of the same stuff in a lot of different marginalized communities. And it's like you were saying, there's this like very encouraged outlook to think like, oh, like being trans or queer, or more specifically, like to the point, being out as trans or
Hmm.
queer is something that only white people do. Um,
Yeah,
which
that's a big
has,
myth.
yeah, well, it has its own, right? The vast majority of trans people that are exploited in the United States, the worst are people of color, um,
Hmm.
first and foremost, right? But beyond that, right? Um, there's a kernel of truth to that.
Hmm.
Um, where so if we think about, for example, like how people will say when they talk about like marriage equality, right? They'll be like, marriage equality is an issue that only like rich white gay guys care about,
Hmm.
right? It's an issue that only, impacted rich white gay guys.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a reason for that, because by portraying trans rights, by portraying rights for LGBT people, right, as something that's this like extraneous privilege born thing, right? Like, oh, like love is love, you get to do a thing. And we're
Right.
not talking about the fact that marriage equality made it possible for people to not get deported, right? We're not talking
Right.
about the fact that marriage equality is often something that made the difference between people dying alone in a hospital or not, between people being able to afford the basic things that, like straight couples are able to afford because of their tax benefits. Like none of that gets talked about, because the system has a vested interest in continuing to perpetuate this idea that being out and being treated well as a trans or queer person is this like very privileged, extraneous, like icing on the cake of life, and not a very, very basic fundamental human right that you need for survival. And a lot of people, especially people in marginalized communities, unfortunately buy into that idea that like, right, why do people prioritize, you know, this like extraneous privileged people crap, you know, this like weird decadent lifestyle choice, right? And like the way that
Yeah.
people talk about trans people in the media too, like, you know, so much history talking about like, oh, like this rich person got surgery so fast and like did all these things and all that crap. It's a very
Yeah.
skewed perspective that the system really benefits from. So I think it's really important for people to recognize that the narrative of the vast majority of trans people, which is very, very, very poor people, predominantly people of color, is not properly, you know, portrayed anywhere. The fact that trans people of color have to struggle with so much more additional stuff on top of racism, right? It's
Right.
transphobia and racism packed into one thing.
Hmm.
Um, is very, very important to recognize, and we have to have solidarity. And in order to fight against colonialism, in order to fight against patriarchy, in order to fight against racism, we have to also fight against anti-trans bigotry. And I think bigotry is a weak word, honestly. I think it's systemic oppression of trans people. It's systemic gender-based oppression, and it's something that permeates everything.
How can I lead this conversation when I don't have a trans person in the room that is as knowledgeable as you are? You know, because I have tried too many different approaches. I talked about the Native American perspective, or how there was multiple genders. I talked about the system of how they classify what is white and what is black, and then also classifying what is the two genders and all this. There's so many ways I have tried. And it's like an experiment. How can I get you to understand what I'm trying to say? You know what I mean? And it like what do you think is like the best way? Like scenario, I'm at work, somebody brings up Caitlyn Jenner, and it's
Well,
a
what
very
about her?
facetious. Yeah. I'm just like, well, if we're talking about her politics, then yeah, by all means. But like, just not, you know, not even just Caitlyn Jenner, like Laverne Cox. Everybody loves Laverne, and so like someone's talking shit about Laverne. How can I defend? Because I have to address that. I can't allow that to happen. I have to give them the
Yeah.
idea, like maybe I'm thinking different and negatively when I shouldn't, and actually humanize this person and understand this person.
I mean, I think it depends on what you're hearing, right? Because
Right.
if you're right, there's a difference between somebody saying that like there's a scarcity of rights and like, you know, LGBTQ people are getting all these rights from somewhere. Still waiting,
Magically.
but um, and then like, you know, racism is still systemic. That's just factually inaccurate. Both the fact that like these things are happening in the way that people think they are, but also the idea that there's a scarcity of rights. Um, because if somebody is advocating for infringing on the rights of trans people, if somebody is advocating for you know, reactionary policies when it comes to gender, period, right?
Right.
Those are going to go hand in hand, even if that person hates trans people passionately. Those policies are going to go hand in hand with other policies that are going to affect them, because reactionary policies they all work in a chain. No oppressed person is going to benefit from another oppressed person being oppressed more.
Yeah.
Similarly, you're not going to lose out by, you know, a sector of the working class gaining rights more and getting more protections, because what we're talking about are not just right social and civil rights. We're also talking about economic rights. We're talking about
Right.
workplace non-discrimination, right? We're talking about housing non-discrimination. We're talking about rights for youth. We're talking about fighting against police terror and criminalization of people, right? There's so much overlap there. And if anybody believes that they're going to win by encouraging the oppression of some of the most already oppressed people in their own community, then they're not looking at things right. What it honestly reminds me of is like when when people say things like, why are burger flippers getting $15 an hour?
Yeah.
Right. But insulin still costs a lot of money. Like, yes, both of those things are problems. And a lot of burger flippers can't afford insulin. Like
Yeah.
these are the
That's
same,
scary.
these are the same issues, it's the same system. But if somebody's just like a straight up bigot and they want to say like shit to just say shit, right? Um, I think you have to choose your battles, right? I think you have to figure
Mhm.
out where where you're going to be most impactful, because you also, you know, you don't need to deplete yourself in trying to change the mind of somebody who's, very set in not being a good person towards other people.
Mhm.
Um, but if there's things that people don't know, if there's information that people don't have, which is often the root of a lot of misinformation, and the root of a lot of bigotry. It's good for people to have that info. Um,
Yeah.
but it's okay to tell someone like, yo, like that's super wrong. Like it's not offensive, it's just inaccurate. It's just
Right. Right.
silly. You're looking like a silly person. you know?
Yeah.
Um,
There's
and
just
people
so
people
much
don't like to feel
conspiracies.
dumb. Yeah. No, there's
It's
a
it's
lot.
it's embarrassing. Like I
Yeah.
heard someone, like, I could talk about this now because it really pissed me off. But somebody literally thought pansexual mean that they also include uh animals within their sex life practices and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, yeah,
Hmm.
really? Someone
Hmm.
told you that? Let's just look up the definition online real quick. Like,
Yeah.
do you see any animal in this definition? And then they were just like, I'm
There's a lot
sorry, I
of
didn't
weird
mean
stuff.
to offend you, but that's what I heard. I was like, well, you heard wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of interesting
Those.
theories. Yeah.
And I kind of blame just like the Christian capitalist culture
Mm.
um with that aspect, because that's where I noticed it from, being someone that was like raised in the church. I'm just like, God, no, this is not it's not true. And y'all need to
Mm.
stop. Y'all gotta cut this
Yeah.
out. It's like, oh, it says you lie with the lamb, and like, stop. Stop quoting scriptures.
Oh no. Oh no. That's wild. There's a lot of weird stuff. I mean, we're talking organized like right wing crap.
Yeah,
There have been like coordinated efforts on the internet by like, really like messed up like right wing people
hmm,
to try to like, for example, uh create a fake like movement or like a fake um whatever demand for pedophiles to be included in like LGBTQ stuff,
yeah,
which is like not a real thing
yeah,
that anyone in the trans or queer community wants or is
right.
advocating for. But there's like this entire false initiative by the right to like do this, and this is something that dates back to a very very long time of like homophobic and transphobic agendas, where like there's this idea of trans and queer people grooming children or like being predators or whatever.
Mhm.
um and it's a very effective mechanism, right? And it's being utilized today too. You'll see it in the media, you see it in the with the right wing pundits like saying all that stuff, and that's why there's so many attacks on trans and queer youth. um it's
Yeah,
very
I
it's very
definitely see that
scary
a
and
lot.
unfortunate. Hmm.
Yeah. I can think about 3 podcasters whose names I'm not even going to mention that I've seen post shit like this
Yeah.
and use the term grooming and stuff. And
Hmm.
I had to be petty with one and be like, "Aren't you Catholic? Maybe you should figure that out in your own
Yeah.
system before you start accusing people." Not saying anything, but let's check those priests before you start being hypocritical around here.
Yeah. A
um,
lot of projection.
yeah, let's go on to the next part because I don't want to take
Cool.
up more of your time here. That was good. I'm sorry. I always get sidetracked on podcasts because that's just my thing.
No, we're talking. It's a dialogue. It's the best kind.
Right, true. You
Hmm.
have equity assessments and coaching.
Hmm.
Assessments and coaching.
Hmm.
How do you incorporate that within
Like into
your
work with
organization?
clients.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes like people will bring us in and uh like for example, if I'm working with a mental health or peer support agency and
Mhm.
their HR people are like, we need to do some work on DEI, right? We need to do like diversity, equity, and inclusion work because either something
Mhm.
happened or because, for a period of time that was all the rage for people to
Mm.
say that they have equity in their workplace and so forth. And our objective, and like when I do this work, my objective is to talk to workers, right? So if I get an opportunity to work with an agency like that, my objective is to talk to frontline workers and be like, how are y'all being treated and what is going on, and
Mm.
like, what do you need from me as a impartial person who, like, if you said these things yourselves, maybe you could get in trouble, like if there's transphobia, racism, whatever that's going on in your workplace, like, but I can say it without naming who told me. I can say I
Right.
just observed something, right? So like I act as kind of I act as a mediator, and my objective with doing this work is to be able to advocate for workers without putting their livelihoods in jeopardy. And the type of coaching that then comes out of that is, if the agency or the workplace is amenable to changing some of their policies or like doing training or whatever, I'll be like, here's my recommendations. Like, maybe something needs to change with your how you do your HR stuff. Maybe something needs to change with how you train people. Maybe, you need to address like who you're hiring and what are they doing to, to other workers, depending on what the needs are. Um, and
Mhm.
yeah, but I think the most important thing is just having somebody that like, specifically trans and queer workers and workers of color can go to and be like, this is the situation in the workplace.
Mm. That's awesome. A lot of people need that shit, like straight
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Like I wish Yale had people like that, but I wouldn't trust Yale doing it. I would trust somebody outsourced like you doing it because like their trainings. I hope I don't ever get in trouble for saying this. Their trainings are ass. Let's just
Yeah.
be honest. It's not really helpful, and you leave these training rooms after doing your assessments, and you're just like, so what did I really learn? And all I get out of it is just I'm just going to be a snitch instead of actually trying to like get some type of education and more understanding for people that don't understand what's going on or don't realize that their rights are being infringed. Um,
Well, it's those union busting videos, right?
well, I have we don't have those,
Oh,
thank
oh,
God.
right, because you're in a
But
union. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, but it's
yeah.
just a lot of trust in the HR,
Hmm.
um the HRs that has the right thing in mind,
Right, of
tell on
course.
everybody, don't let nobody get away with shit. It's like, where's the conversation? It's like it's a lot of just I'm gonna dictate to you that I heard that you were talking about this, and but you like there's where's the education behind it? Like why do we say this is incorrect? Why do we say this is incorrect information? Um, uh, and it's like 2 hours long. Kirill is just
Oh, I
annoying. I
know.
literally go back to that when you was explaining that. Like,
No, I mean, the state of Connecticut has a required like training that people have to go through in any workplace, like a sexual harassment training. I remember like I had to go through it at my last job. and
Mhm.
they had like this whole like thing like, oh, your coworker just came out as trans. What do you do? It's like, A, misgender her, like B, don't misgender her, C, like misgender her behind her back, or like what, it was like some weird shit like that. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, okay, like cool. Um
Oh my God. Yeah, I had that question too, actually.
yeah, and
I
like there's
remember
like
that.
all these like dudes who are like, what, you can't take a compliment, like all these like
Yeah.
weird scenarios. Yeah. No, I think, it's ultimately right. I it's a privilege for me, and it's a really great opportunity for me and the team to be able to be an all trans organization, being like, hey, if you are a workplace, or if you're an agency that wants to do better, that wants to like do better by your workers and also by other stakeholders that you have, like people that are receiving services from you, you want to improve in these areas, and like this is a good faith effort, you're gonna get a lot out of it. But if it's not a good faith effort and you're just doing it to like check off, a checkbox to say you went through an equity training, that's not going to get you very far. And in that
Right.
situation, like the best that I can do is just talk to your workers and see like what kind of resources I can offer them.
Yeah. Oh man. And I think that's just the issue that Connecticut is steeping into, just checking off, making sure they're good, instead
Mm-hmm.
of like. And I'm just speaking for Connecticut because I haven't worked anywhere else. And I mean, a little bit in North Carolina, but I was a kid, so that's totally different. But
Like
just
child labor.
yeah, yeah. I was straight up child labor in North
Mm,
Carolina. But it's
yeah.
okay, Grandpa. It's not a bad. It was. I did it because I love you, Grandpa. It wasn't
Oh,
that
that's what
bad,
all the small businesses are trying to do. We're a family. You got to do it because you love us.
right?
Yeah. No, there's a lot. Connecticut is wild. Connecticut, what you were talking about with like the training that you went through. So much of that orientation is about like, we don't want to get sued. That's
Right.
our main objective. If you see something, say something, otherwise we will get sued. That's right, like that's the point. And a lot, because of that being the priority, a lot like flies under the radar. And similarly in Connecticut, a lot of transphobic treatment of people flies under the radar,
Mm,
because people are like, well, we live in Connecticut, like everything's great, if I say something, something will be done about it. It's not going to be done about it.
mhm.
there's
Yeah.
there's so much crap that happens here that actually mirrors like even like legislation or like policy changes, or like just treatment of people, that mirrors what happens in the states that like we like to say, oh, we're different than Florida, we're different than Texas. There's a lot that's going on in Connecticut that is very similar. A lot of people don't know about it, so
Right.
sucks.
Right. So the
Yeah.
big part is, just as I asked Norman from Q Plus, do you
Mhm.
think Connecticut is on the right track on being the the safe place in the United States for people like me and you, or is there a lot of like hype upness that really does not play the par as they try to make it sound?
When you say people like you, do you mean like queer people? Do you mean black
Yeah,
people? Like what do you mean? Because there's
staying on
different things.
the queer, yeah, it's queer and trans aspect, like
Okay.
our
Um,
colorful asses.
um, well, I think that Connecticut inside the United States is comparatively less egregious in their like openly like vocal mistreatment of people, and like, at least in Connecticut, people say like, oh yeah, we're down with whatever.
Mhm,
But and Connecticut has a responsibility to continue to uphold that image and to continue to uphold that identity.
mhm,
It's very easy without pressure from the community and without pressure from anybody else who like supports Connecticut being a safe haven for marginalized people. Um, it's very easy for them to say, "Oh, we said that this is what we are, so like now we don't need to do anything." Um,
right.
but like, so here's an example, right? In Connecticut, like very shortly after like it was announced that Connecticut is a great place to be trans, everything is super duper. Um,
Mhm,
Connecticut Medicaid Husky quietly made some changes in their policies that were actually pretty severe.
Oh no.
Specifically, they changed the age at which anybody can get top surgery to 18.
Mm,
Um, they made a cutoff that you can't get top surgery below the age of 18.
mhm,
They put a bunch of requirements in place for people to be able to access top surgery and also access facial feminization surgery, including a requirement that was really, really absurd and like did not seem to like know what they were talking about, where they said they needed a PhD with the ability to diagnose psychiatric comorbidities. Like you can't even be like a PsyD, you can't be an MD, you have to be a PhD specifically, and you have to practice psychiatry, which
okay.
is really weird and really silly, and a
Yeah.
very specific requirement. Like you have to have a letter from that person to get top
Wow.
surgery. Yeah, so this is like
That
a
sounds
very
very difficult.
is because there's like nobody who matches that. So there was this big push by
Wow.
mental health providers in Connecticut to be like, yo, what the fuck? Like, y'all thought that this would fly under the radar. You did this quietly. This was not announced to anybody. And they're like, oh, we talked to like professionals who work with trans people. And all these people, like including myself, were like, well, you didn't talk to any of us.
Mhm.
And we don't know of anybody else who specializes in supporting this population. So who the fuck did you talk to? And they started backpedaling, and apparently like they changed some stuff. But it's very insidious because they'll do that stuff quietly, right? In other states, they'll do it very loudly and they'll be like, we hate trans people, rah, 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 this is our identity. But in a state like
Mhm.
Connecticut that has an image to uphold as like we're the state that does good things, when they do fucked up things like that, they'll do it very quietly and without a microscope, and like people who are constantly watching the pulse of like not just legislation but like individual policies within like different agencies and institutions, it's very
Mhm.
difficult to grab a hold of that. And we got very lucky that people were watching that stuff and caught it and were able to advocate against it because it happened quietly. um, right, similarly, in Connecticut, I was just supporting somebody with accessing housing, um, because of a domestic violence situation, um, right? A young black trans person, and
Mhm.
he was denied uh, affordable housing when he applied for it because his birth certificate didn't match his ID. Have you
Mm.
ever been asked for your birth certificate when you applied for housing anywhere?
Never.
Okay,
Never.
yeah. So,
I have moved a few times, so I could
yeah,
just say that
yeah.
never.
Yeah, and that again, that quietly happened in Connecticut through, a state agency that's supposed to provide housing to somebody who was in a very, very dangerous situation, who is supposed to be, according to Connecticut, at the top of the list for emergency housing, was just straight up denied affordable housing because of straight up open transphobia. And this again also happened very quietly. So I think in our state, right, there
Mhm.
are laws in place that protect people. There are things in place that help, that people can point to say like y'all aren't supposed to be doing this. But a
Right.
lot of the nefarious things and a lot of the things that really harm people, um, especially if you look at the wealth and income disparity within the state, especially like with the segregation of that, um, you're gonna encounter a lot of problems that are unique to living in a state like this. And you have to make sure that you have community. You have to make sure that you're watching out for what's going on, and like, are your options changing? Are your rights changing quietly under the radar?
Mm.
So that's something to just be aware of.
Mm. Thank you, Kirill.
Yeah.
That's this is definitely a dialogue that has to continue to keep on going. And I'm thinking about like maybe I should do like a show that's adjacent from this and just focus on predominantly LGBTQ issues and stuff. And I think it'll be great, like a once a month type of thing, because there's just so much layers to talk about, so
Hmm.
much that goes on that you don't really notice. If I'm a dude living in fucking I don't know what's nice around here, Fairfield, and I'm a working class person, and I'm also queer, and I don't really hang out with that many people all around the state. I just know my bubble. I'm not going to know any of this. I'm going to assume that the Democrats have my rights in mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume it. I'm like, well, we're in a blue state, so we're going to be fine regardless. But when you're seeing that even like Husky can't even get their shit right when they're supposed to be like a really good, healthcare option, that they can't even get their shit right. So it's just mind-boggling. Honestly, it's very mind-boggling.
It sucks.
It bothers me.
Yeah.
But I want to congratulate you on, because like PeerPride is what, a year old? It's a baby.
Yeah, a
right?
little bit more than a year old. Yeah.
And look how far like y'all are, like just doing the damn shit. Like
it's been good. I mean, there's a need. I didn't
Right.
think there would be so much of a need. Connecticut, a blue state, right?
Right.
No, we knew, but like I didn't know that there is like not a lot of trans-led stuff. Like we started Trans Haven as like, oh, Greater New Haven, we need stuff in Greater New Haven that's by and for trans people. Cool. We get people from like Bumblefuck all the time being like, I'm in Bumblefuck. What do you have here? And so now we're everywhere, and like it's amazing. And I think, going back to Trans Day of Remembrance, it's going to be a really, really unique opportunity around the state for people to connect. So people should definitely plug in. If you're trans, definitely plug in.
Yeah, definitely put that information out in the link below. Again, this is going to be happening all over Connecticut, and which is really, really dope. And I'm so excited about your success and being able to get this together, because this is something that's definitely going to change a lot. And definitely you are such a badass for staying with this for so long. You know what I mean? Like 10 years and shit. Like,
oh god, that's wild. Yes, it's been a lot of T-Door, a lot of trans stuff in general. But this statewide thing, like people are like, oh, Kirill is doing a thing. Kirill is not doing a thing. I made group chats, and PeerPride made like things and like promo material for people who need it, but it is like different trans people who have never met each other around the state being like, yo, we want to organize a T-Door, and now everyone's working together. And it would not be possible without people on the ground who want to like make a difference in their own towns and their own cities and like create space for trans people. This is not something that somebody can just be like, we're making this happen. It's something that comes organically from the community, and that's what's exciting to me about it.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Kirill. And this was a really, really great discussion. And I'm happy that you was able to take the time to be on this podcast again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone that's out there in Spotify world and Anchor world, if you like what you're hearing, please like, share, and support. Definitely. The link will be below on how you can support. No amount is not acceptable. Oh shit, I'll take 50 cents, whatever. So I want everybody to have a really good day today, and thank you, Kirill, once again for coming out.
Thank
and
you.
I hope you also
everyone
have
support
a good day.
Jamar. Jamar is amazing. Please give him money. Jamar needs money.
Yes, we need money.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Have a good one. Bye.
Blank period, yeah. On my black, brown, and indigenous. Gotta holler if you really feeling this. Gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?